Today on the Real Life Planning Podcast, we have a special topic for our women listeners. If you want to get more clarity and confidence and control over your money, I think today's guest is just the right person for you. It's Dr. Kim Bridges. She's the founder of Bright Woman Financial. And I'm so pleased to have her for this conversation today. We're really going to get into it. Welcome, Kim. I'm so happy to see you here. Tell us what's important to know about you.
Oh, thanks so much, Cynthia. I really appreciate the opportunity. What's important to know about me? I would say I have a bit of an unconventional career path, but I truly believe, Cynthia, that all of the life experiences that we have lead us to become the person that we're supposed to be and to bring to our careers what we're supposed to bring to our careers to be able to help others and to reach people that only we can reach, perhaps. So I had a different path. I started off went to college like most kids out of high school, had career aspirations, but got there and realized I had no idea what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I took an unpredictable, I would say, path and just decided to join the Marine Corps. So as a 19-year-old, I joined the Marine Corps, took the first overseas assignment I could get because I was ready for adventure. And I absolutely loved it. It was a great fit for me. It led me down a path, though, that I probably otherwise would never have gone down. I not only became a Marine, but then I married a Marine and he stayed in for 20 years. So we had this full military lifestyle for 20 years, raised our children in a military family. And this was a ways back. So it was at a time when we didn't have internet. We didn't have a lot of options for spouses of military members to have their own career while their spouse was in the military, and we were moving every couple of years. So I had made the decision when we started a family that I would get out of the military and stay home and provide the stability that we needed in our household. So I did that and I stayed out for a lot of years. Now, I always knew I wanted a career. I always had passion for learning and education. So I continued learning whenever and wherever I could. I took college classes. This was before we had online learning. So it was whenever I was at a place where I could take some college classes, I did. And then when we approached my husband's military retirement, I was ready to start focusing in on what do I want to do with my career. And I ended up transferring 100 credit hours from 7 different universities to Kansas State University and completed my undergrad. I was pretty much done with it, but I had scattered credits. So I finished up in family and consumer sciences, but something happened at the tail end of my education. And that is, I took a class in personal finance. I had no exposure to personal finance growing up. My parents really didn't teach me anything beyond balancing a checkbook and the importance of not going in the negative in your checking account. And taking that personal finance class just was an eye-opening experience for me. It was the beginning of my financial awakening. The light bulb came on. I knew this is something that was so important. Everybody needs to know this stuff. Why didn't they teach us this in high school? I was in my 30s at that time. So I really just knew that was what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to learn as much as I could about personal financial planning and then help as many people as I could make smarter financial decisions. So I went directly into a master's degree program in personal financial planning. And then I would say through the grace of God was in the right place at the right time, that I was provided with an amazing opportunity to be part of the first cohort of doctoral students in personal financial planning at Texas Tech University. So I did that. Went on to Texas Tech. At that point, my 2 oldest kids were grown and out of the house. The 2 younger ones came with us. My husband was retired from the military at that time. And we had the agreement that he'd have the first 20-year career and then I'd get the second 20-year career, which we could have a whole conversation about why that's not a good idea later on. But I went on, found my passion, studied financial planning. And because I had a perspective of a woman who had spent time out of the workforce as I was studying personal financial planning, I just had so many light bulb moments of the ways in which we're disadvantaged when we take time out of the workforce. Things like we're not paying into the Social Security system, right?
We're not paying into our own retirement account.
And we're not paying into our own retirement accounts. So that puts us at such a huge disadvantage like down the road. But we don't always know that at that point that we're making that decision. And in fact, I reflect back on, why did I make that decision? Why did I decide to leave the workforce to raise my family? And I already mentioned we were a military family.
You made a good decision for your young children.
Exactly. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? I think what I want to encourage, not just women, but women and men, anyone that's facing this decision, what do we do? Really look at not just the short term, but the long term consequences as well. And I'll give you an example. I had not only the military culture that essentially made it very hard to have two careers, but I also had a very conservative church culture that really said, hey, women, your job is to be a nurturer and to raise your children and support your husband, and it's his job to be the breadwinner. And then I also, in the schooling that I was going through, took a household economics class where I was shown, and at this time I was a young mom, I had two little ones, and I was shown from the research of a Nobel laureate in economics, Gary Becker, showed that when you consider the household as an economic unit, you are actually better off if one of you specializes in home production and one of you specializes in market work, the work that we exchange for wages in the market. And the idea behind it is that when we have this specialization and exchange, the person in the market is going to be able to focus more fully on doing their very best job, showing up, climbing that career ladder, getting more earnings. So they will have a greater earnings capacity. And the person doing home production will get very good at running the household and taking care of the children and all of that. So that specialization gives us a comparative advantage in what we do. And when you put those two together and you look at it as a pie, the household doesn't just get a bigger slice of the pie, they get a bigger pie through this specialization and exchange. We've heard those concepts before. They're economic concepts, but this was applied to the household. And that combined with the number crunching that said, here, ladies, if you want to work, I shouldn't imply that it's always ladies, but back in those years, it was.
We certainly don't want to say that taking care of a young family and managing the households and taking on more of the household, that is work. It just, in current society, it's not financially valued for what it is worth.
And that's the sad part about it. So we live within systems and organizations that were built decades and hundreds of years ago, and they really aren't adapted to
modern world,
the modern family, modern life. I remember watching the professor put some numbers up on the chalkboard that showed, if this is your earnings, then you take out taxes, and then you take out your childcare expenses, and you take out your commuting expenses and your wardrobe expenses and your food for eating out more often and all of that, you're not making anything. So why would you work and not make anything? Of course, that's looking at it through a very short-term framework, just the here and now, the paycheck to paycheck. That's not looking at it in the context of, if you do stay attached to the workforce, and I'm going to put this as the caveat because I don't think the answer is all one way or all the other way. We need to learn how to do the yes and. Let's try and figure out a way to make both work so we can be there for our families and keep a foot in the workforce so that we keep our resumes current and continuous so that we can continue contributing to retirement accounts, earning Social Security so that we're not putting zeros in all of those years on our Social Security earnings record. So anyway, long story. Sorry.
So let me interrupt you here.
Yes. If
you remember, maybe it was about 10 years ago, Catherine Solman wrote a book called Ambition Redefined, which was all about idea of if you leave the workplace for several decades without keeping your toe dipped in the water during that period, you shortchange your Social Security, you shortchange your retirement savings, but you also shortchange your future earnings power by managing the arc of your career and being able to tell a cohesive narrative about each step to lead towards higher earnings.
That's exactly right. And the idea of flex work really wasn't around back when my family was young, and we didn't have the internet. We couldn't work virtually. We couldn't do any of that back then.
Weren't as many options. Yeah.
I'll come back to this, I think, but the whole idea of flex work, of creating something that can work for us, I think it's so important. And that's where I am right now at this stage of my career. It's especially important for women because we are the ones that tend to have the weight of the family life, the household, the things that we need to do for our family. It tends to fall more heavily on our shoulders. And so even women who are working full time, and I'm sure you're very familiar with the research, but in parent couples that are both working full time, women are still taking on the lion's share of all the work around the house. So men are stepping up. I'm not here to try and disparage men and say they're not doing their part. They are stepping up, but it's an evolution and it's taking time. We need to provide within the workforce more ways to allow families to have the flexibility they need, both for the mothers and for the fathers, right? So that they can be there both for their families as well as for their careers and not take that break in their careers.
The most important takeaway for somebody that's in that early career, just starting their family stage, the most important takeaway is that you can't afford not to pay attention to the economic life of yourself individually and in your relationship, that it is critical that you are making prudent decisions along the way so that you understand the trade-offs, you understand how to work around them, and that you aren't delegating all of the financial decisions to your partner.
Very well said. And I think that you and I, as financial planners, one way we can help is to illuminate, to provide clarity for our clients. This is where I feel like financial planning is so important. If I can help one woman make better financial decisions by illuminating what her financial reality is and looking at the long-term consequences of decisions that are made today, then I will have fulfilled my purpose. That's what I care about. What I think is so important is that women don't wait to get professional help to look at their finances. One thing I've learned in my years of experience and the countless number of financial plans that I've built, when you build a holistic financial plan and you're looking not just at today, but you're looking at the future and how might this play out if we stay on this current path. When you have a plan where the result shows that it's not a successful plan, there's a risk. And when we say not successful, we mean there's a higher risk than what we would want to see that this plan is going to run out of money before the end of the client's life. I'm sure you've seen this. I've seen this. And what it shows up in a financial plan is that we see the portfolio value starts to decline. But because women tend to live longer than men, and women also tend to marry older men, it's almost always playing out that the greatest risk of failure happens to the woman in her later years. And that is very concerning because when you reach that point where you see it happening, there's not a lot you can do but deal with it by reducing your lifestyle, maybe moving in with your children, or whatever you have to do to try and stretch those dollars to the end of your life. I don't know any woman that wants to be in that position at the end of her life.
No. And so for the younger women listening, some practical things that people can do if you want to be home with your kids in a flexible fashion when they're young. When you get out of school and you're in your first career, you want to put your foot on the gas pedal of saving for retirement as much as you can before you take a career break to have kids, or you step back from an intense career pace during the years when your kids are younger. Or if you have to take care of an aging parent during that period, if you don't have kids, that prior to the career break, if you can get as much as you can in early, time and compounded can solve some of that problem.
Absolutely. And then I would suggest that trying to fill that break with some flex work that shows continuous work on your resume and where you're still staying current in your industry with what's going on. You're keeping your skills current. You're familiar with whatever software is being used. So when you step back in, you're not stepping in at a lower earnings level because you're able to show the continuity in your career path. That is so big in looking at long-term outcomes and the whole earnings trajectory over the course of your career. Because when you stop cold, you drop down in your earnings and then you never really catch back up again, not fully. It'll take some years to get your earnings back up, but your earnings trajectory will forever be lower than what it had been if you had not stepped away. And again, I'm not trying to say don't step away. I'm saying let's look at the whole plan and see what the impact is going to be. And let's see if we can come up with a solution that will provide some flexibility while keeping that continuity so that your lifelong earnings does not suffer and so that you can afford to continue putting money away in your retirement account during those years that you're spending more time at home.
The third thing that I would add to that is in our practice, we work with real estate investors. These are mostly couples, mostly married, but not all, who are building and scaling their real estate businesses so they can be more functional than typical retirement age. And that's to build multiple sources of income. So to have money in your retirement accounts, to have income producing real estate, and maybe to have some other kind of a side business that you've invested in and are trying to grow over time that might eventually turn into a new career, is to think income diversification as well as a traditional path.
Yes, that's a great strategy. Great strategy. So one thing that's really important is the earlier in life you can start getting your head around your whole financial picture by engaging with someone in doing a comprehensive plan and seeing what trajectory am I on and is that going to work out for me? And let me check in on that plan before I make major decisions, many major decisions that we could make that could derail a plan if we haven't thought through them and really looked at the consequences. I'm not just talking about stepping out of the workforce, but also make sure that you always stay involved in finances. So one thing that we sometimes see is that when life gets chaotic, when we've got children and careers and so much going on, we tend to approach the household in a divide and conquer way. I can't do everything. You do these things. I'll do these things. And very often at that point, women delegate the financial matters to their husbands. And they say, like, I'm dealing with what are we going to eat and how are we going to get the kids to daycare in time and all of that. You can do finances. I'm fine with not being involved. I trust you. But I would say you both need to be involved for many reasons. And I'm at a place in my life now where when I see our older women whose husbands are, or they're worried about their husbands passing or their husbands pass away, and they know nothing because they were not involved at all. It goes both ways. Sometimes the woman's the one that pays all the bills and does all that. And then if she dies unexpectedly, he's lost. He doesn't know where she keeps any of the records or how to log into the accounts or anything. So it goes both ways. I have heard too many stories that just make me sick to my stomach because a woman stepped out of the finances and let her husband take control and thought that everything was going well and then found out when it was a little too late that things weren't going well. And that just, it's heartbreaking when you hear some of the stories.
Marriage or any kind of long-term relationship, it's an economic partnership. And there can be tremendous dividends. I like to call it the marriage dividend when both members of the couple are rowing in the same direction, where you have cohesive view of the goals, what everybody's working for, and the timeline for different things, and are planning and taking action steps towards them, can be really economically powerful and can allow for a lot of flexibility in life. Like in your situation, right, where during kind of the years where your kids were young, you prioritized them and allowed your husband to be in a career that had him moving. Lord knows how many times did you move? A lot, right?
19 times in 20 years.
Oh my goodness. And then now you're in a stage in life where your business is a priority. And so those can be wonderful things, but that require communication and collaboration if everybody is focused towards similar goals.
In the same direction.
I think I'm a little bit older than you, but like my parents' generation, they did not talk about money. And even now when they need you, younger boomers, Gen X, this is the first generation. They're having to navigate this without good models for how to have these conversations, which is why sometimes having a neutral third party, like a financial planner or a financial coach, can be so helpful.
I agree 100%. And I grew up in the same generation as you. And you're right. We never talked about money. Money, sex, those were off limit conversations in households when we were growing up. Now, the interesting thing is that culture made it much more comfortable to talk about sex, but not money. It really just now getting to where we talk about money.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, when we were growing up, there weren't commercials on TV about creating a financial plan. There weren't commercials about funding retirement and saving for retirement. I remember asking my mom what retirement was at one point when I was 11 or 12 or something. And she said, that's when you don't work anymore, you stop working. And I was like, how do you pay your bills if you don't work? And she said, you get a check from the government and you might get a check from your business. But they were in the generation where you worked for the same company for 35 years and you retired with a gold watch and a pension. And that doesn't exist anymore.
Most people are pensionless.
Exactly. Unfortunately, we're in this transition zone where we aren't taught about personal finance from kindergarten up, which I really feel like we should. You know, in kindergarten, we're taught about how to tell the difference between the coins and the bills. And then you learn how to add and subtract them. It was in the workbooks when I was a kid. I'm sure it's all on computers now. But then they don't teach you anything about money until you graduate. Now, fortunately, I think there's 30 states now that require a course in personal finance before graduation, but it's not.
My two younger kids, my youngest one is 18, that the personal finance course that they got here in New Jersey, which is great public schools, it was like terms and definitions. It was an online course. It didn't talk about the delayed gratification or how to budget for your first apartment, what the student loan is, or how to pay it back. I would give it a big meh.
One thing that concerns me is that I think a lot of us assume that defaults are going to be sufficient to prepare us for retirement. And what I'm referring to is like the default contribution rate. So we've come a long way in retirement plans, but keep in mind, not everybody has a retirement plan at their work.
Half of America doesn't have a retirement plan.
Exactly. So about half don't even have a retirement plan at work. Half that do, they might have a default contribution level, but those default contribution levels often are only at 3%.
Just enough to get the match.
And if they're smart enough to say, you should contribute to get the total match, so go ahead and put 6% in, and then the company's going to match 3% or whatever that might be, then they think, okay, good, I'm good. That's enough to build a successful retirement. But they've never questioned, is that percentage going to be enough to get me to my retirement goals? And too often people just go along with the defaults. They make an assumption that they will be prepared, but they don't check in along the way. They wait until retirement to actually reach out to a professional and say, okay, here's my retirement nest egg. Can you help me create a paycheck from this to fund my life? And they don't realize that they should have been checking with us for the last 20 years to see if they were funding that enough so that they could continue their chosen lifestyle in retirement.
One of the most powerful things that anybody that's listening can do is to run a retirement projection every year to see where you are relative to your retirement goal. Like just stepping on a scale. Stepping on a scale regularly can help you keep on top of your health. At least once a year, it's just running that retirement projection and seeing if you're on track. If you keep doing what you're doing, are you going to be able to meet your goals?
And I love that you related that to stepping on a scale, because I do think we can all relate to that. There are times in our lives where like, I don't even want to step on the scale. I know it's bad, but I don't want to see it. But not seeing it doesn't make it not true. If you have gained weight, the weight is there, whether you look at the scale or not, it's there. It's the same with finances. If you avoid doing financial planning because you are afraid of what it's going to show you, and I think a lot of people avoid reaching out to a professional because they're afraid of what that professional is going to tell them. They're afraid that professional is going to say, you're spending too much, you're not saving enough, you're not on track to meet your goals. And they don't want to face that truth, so they avoid it. But the sooner you go and get the help you need with a professional and you face that financial truth, the more options you will have to recover. But if you wait too long, sometimes there really are, all you're doing is closing the door on options and possibilities. So the sooner you do it, the better.
We've certainly seen that kind of millennial and younger, they do have a higher level of financial savvy when it comes to understanding employee benefits and some of the things that they should do when they're in their 20s to get off to a good start. But we've also seen that information alone doesn't change behavior. If somebody's in this place where they would like to prioritize becoming more financially savvy early on in their career, what are the things that they should do?
I think being curious is really important. Once you start becoming aware of something, then you start getting questions in your head, and that's a good thing. So one of the things that I want to focus on is in my practice is making sure that my clients, whether they're women or men, that my clients know that I love questions. I want to answer their questions. And no question is a stupid question. I think that women in particular are afraid to ask questions when they're in the presence of their financial professional and their spouse, because they feel they're going to feel stupid by asking maybe a question that might be too basic. But I think that we can use AI for learning to help build up our financial awareness. Feed that curiosity. Don't be afraid to ask the question. Recognize that AI is not always going to give you the right answer, but you can generate some questions, a little bit of background knowledge, some questions that then you can bring to your financial professional and say, can you tell me more about this? I'm not quite sure I understand it. And don't be afraid to ask questions. You need that. Your financial professional wants to be in relationship with you and help you learn, help you grow, help you be empowered. So show up with your questions and let them help you help yourself.
So where can people find you online?
I'm at brightwomenfinancial.com. You'll get what you need to learn about me on my website, or you can schedule a call with me if you would like. And my email is on there as well.
Are you on social, Kim?
I am on social. Yes, I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook.
So thank you so much for having this conversation with me today. I feel like we've just grazed the tip of the iceberg, if you will, about all these issues around women and money. And I look forward to continuing it at a future time.
Yeah, would love to. It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much, Cynthia.
Thanks, Kim.